Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the community briefing for the Inverness and Cromarty Firth Green Freeport. Before I hand over to your chair for this evening, please note that this event is being recorded to allow those who are unable to attend the event this evening or wish to review it afterwards to do so after the event. The Q&A feature that you'll see at the top of your screens, folks, will remain open throughout the event, and we'll be picking up these questions and answers after the speakers have finished their briefing for us this evening. Please feel reassured that if we do run short of time and we don't have a chance to capture all of the questions, please note that we will be putting an answer to any unanswered questions alongside the presentation, where it will be made available on the Green Freeport website. Final note to mention is that we ask for your questions to remain appropriate, so any inappropriate comments won't actually be referred through to the panel, so worth bearing in mind when you're thinking about what questions you wish to pose this evening. So I'd like to now pass over to your chair for this evening, Councillor Raymond Bremner, Leader of the Highland Council, who'll introduce you to the event and to the speakers. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Scott, and welcome to everybody. Welcome to this community briefing for the Inverness and Cromarty Firth Green Freeport, which is the first since the Prime Minister, together with the Scottish Government, met with some of us at Invergordon Port and just some weeks ago. So this follows a number of briefings held during the bid process up to mid-2022, and the event aims to highlight what the Green Freeport Award might mean for Highland communities and businesses, not just now but in the future. So it follows a very well attended business breakfast held this morning. Further events you should know to follow, with a series of community events to be organised by the consortium to get information out there and to keep the dialogue going, and alongside community events to inform the preparation of area place plans. Alongside work has started on a community-led place plan for the Black Isle, which people can also feed into. So, and I would encourage you to do that if you get an opportunity and a chance. So I hope you find the event really useful, and I'm looking forward to hearing your questions. Just to reiterate what Scott said there just now, we'd like to keep this a reasonable session, so please be respectful of the speakers and of others who may be listening in on the webcast. So we have a range of speakers from across the consortium of partners to tell you a lot more about this evening, and the first of those speakers I'm going to pass to is Steve Chisholm, and each of them will let you know who they are and as they go on presenting each of the slides to you. So the first is Steve Chisholm. Steve, would you like to introduce yourself and introduce the first slide, please?
Yeah, thanks, Raymond. So hello, everyone. So I'm Steve Chisholm. I'm an Innovations and Operations Director with Global Energy Group, one of the consortium founding members. So we just want to kick off and really first explain what is a green freeport. So UK government plans for 10 of the freeports were announced by government in 2019. 8 were progressed in England, and after extensive consultation between Scottish and Westminster governments, they agreed for there to be 2 freeports in Scotland. Competitively bid in June 2021. The winners were announced just this January by the Prime Minister, who made a personal visit to the Cromarty Firth to do so. The green freeports are places within the UK's land border where special tax and customs rules are applied. Freeport contains 2 types of sites, tax sites and customs sites. You'll hear a lot more detail on the benefits of those shortly, but they encourage business expansion and inward investment as companies can locate themselves within the freeport so they can take advantage of the customs site, the tax site benefits, or the benefits of both. Part of the process is the ability to retain business rates for creating a pool of funding for reinvestment in the region, and we'll hear more about that process as the presentation continues. So moving on. One of the things that were key were when the 5 ports submitted bids for green freeport status, the level of support that the Inverness and Cromarty Firth Freeport got from the renewable energy community was quite unprecedented. and there was overwhelming support, as you can see from some of the logos here on the slide here, that not just from local businesses but from major international energy developers as well. And their support really underpinned the strength of our area's bid to become a world centre of excellence, particularly in the areas of floating wind and green hydrogen. However, as you can see, the support covers a broad membership across local government, academia and industry, all working together to get the benefits of Freeport feeding into regeneration of the region. Next slide, please. So the Freeport and the benefits that come within it fall within what is a 45-kilometre diameter circle. That's what's illustrated here in the dotted line. However, in reality, what we're saying is we're following the distance to work model, which allows us to reallocate, if you like, that territory across the coastal regions, which is what you see in the heavy green line, which stretches kind of north up towards Golspie to the north and then out towards Nairn in the east. So across these wide range of communities, you see a large area there where the benefits of the Freeport can apply. And the green line there shows that landmass based around the travel to work times, as we said, and it essentially covers all of the main elements and areas within the Inner Moray Firth and a few more besides. The final tax sites boundaries themselves in the detail are subject to ongoing consideration, and that's now part of the process of our engagement with the two governments as we seek to finalise the more detailed terms of how the Freeport will operate. And then moving on to look at some of the key benefits from the Freeport. Net zero has been a common ambition of both governments, Scotland and Westminster, but clearly energy security has become a major concern that's impacted all of us since Russia's invasion of the Ukraine, and the Freeport supports local decarbonisation due to our leading position in offshore wind and hydrogen, and that allows us to play a major part. So it's a major contribution towards meeting the government's ambitious targets for greenhouse gases. In terms of inward investment, huge interest from around the world in locating here. So we're looking at the expansion of local businesses and the inward investment of new from other parts of the UK or around the world, and that's estimated to create the potential for £2.6 billion of inward investment. Industry experts and governments see the potential here around the Cromarty Firth and wider area to be the centre of excellence, world leading in floating offshore wind manufacture and the production of green hydrogen. And the aggregate of all that potential is seen by our economists as creating up to 15,000 direct jobs. In the wider area, that would create 10,000 further more jobs, indirect jobs, or within the wider supply chain across the rest of Scotland and beyond. And because of the nature of the longevity of renewables, we can look ahead to decades of investment and involvement. So creating long-term stable jobs in the green industry across a really wide range of sectors and occupational types, and those been highly paid, well skilled. The Freeport success opens up access to £26 million of funding. £1 million of that comes to us over the next year to help pay for the costs of establishing the Freeport and the governance and administration that go with it. And then a further £25 million is available as seed investment for key projects to kickstart the regeneration of the economy. And that seed funding is open to the tax sites to apply for, and those will be governed and assessed on a merits basis. More on that later also. Huge potential here to really overturn what is generations of depopulation and long-standing sort of socioeconomic impacts on the area. So really can reverse decline and attract a much newer and diversified workforce. We've created the powerhouse. More on that later from Joanne, but it's effectively a research and training centre which will allow new ideas, new solutions, new methods of manufacturing and science to be put into the production of floating offshore wind and green hydrogen. So we can be right at the cutting edge, not just setting up a powerful industry for us in our part of Scotland, but creating new solutions which can be exported around the world as other people follow our lead in the areas of floating wind and hydrogen. There's a commitment within the Freeport bid that we put forward and an obligation us to commit to paying the living wage for the developments within the Freeport. and to fair work and to following the Scottish Business Pledge. So strong commitment there. And it's inclusive growth. It's about not just developing the industry, but it's about developing the communities round about, the welfare of those, and making sure that there's a positive impact coming from the Freeport across the wider community as a whole. So in essence, it's about the regeneration of our communities, catching up on last time, and upgrading our key infrastructure so we can play a major part in the industries of tomorrow. Thanks. Sinclair, I think over to you now to introduce yourself and pick up the baton.
Thank you very much, Steve. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sinclair Brown, and I'm the Chief Exec at the Port of Inverness and one of the main members of the consortium that lodged the bid for the Green Freeport. I'm going to touch firstly on the Regional Spatial Strategy. The Regional Spatial Strategy was prepared by Highland Council and sets out plans and ambitions for the wider Highland region. The Inverness and Cromarty Firth Green Freeport is central to the vision set out in the regional spatial strategy and is fully integrated into it as well. It recognises the importance of Inverness and Cromarty Firth Green Freeport is vital to the future renewables and decarbonisation of the economy, as Steve mentioned earlier. Significant contribution that the Green Freeport can also play to local and national outcomes, as well as being the ability to promote the Green Freeport zone as a candidate for national development. And also the Inverness and Cromarty Firth Green Freeport is fully supported in the emerging Inner Moneyfirth Local Development Plan. Next slide, please. So just going on to a bit more detail, as Steve touched on earlier, about the specific benefits relating to that come with the Green Freeport. Steve mentioned one of the main planks is the tax sites. There are we're allowed to have a maximum of 3 tax sites up to 600 hectares. The tax sites, the boundaries are currently subject to the outline business case, which is going to be submitted. This slide here sets out some of the principal benefits to companies who want to relocate within the Green Freeport. Specifically, the potential exemption from land and building transaction tax. There's also enhanced structures and building allowance, enhanced capital allowances, which for qualifying plant and machinery. Also, employers' national insurance for any new jobs created above £25,000 per annum. The employer will pay 0% national insurance. However, the relief is available for 9 years from April 22, and the Green Freeport Consortium has taken the stance that any national insurance benefits will be reinvested in the training fund for the ICF Green Freeport to prevent local displacement and incentivise training. We also mentioned earlier that there's potential for non-domestic business rates relief. Businesses may be eligible for up to 100% relief from non-domestic business rates on certain properties and property improvements within the tax sites. This will apply from 5 years from the point of first relief and must be applied for by 1st of March 2028. Next slide, please, Joanne. Moving on to the other area, which is the customs site. Now, unlike the tax sites, there's no limit on the amount of customs sites that can be situated within the Green Freeport. The customs sites offer a number of incentives to make trade easier for organisations who are undertaking business within the Green Freeport. The customs agreements have to be signed by the landowners and they will adhere to them throughout the duration. Authorised businesses operating in the Green Freeport customs sites can import goods for storage and or processing with import duties and import VAT suspended. The standard rule is a 90-day temporary storage before any duty or VAT is applicable. That zero rate in respect of certain transactions taking place in the Green Freeport customs site as well. Excise duty payments suspended whilst goods stored and processed within the customs sites. And the businesses that are able to produce excise goods from raw materials under customs duty suspension. However, it's not all a free-for-all because there is tight regulation in goods for the Green Freeports, and goods must be cleared for approval before they can enter the customs site. Stringent boundaries are also enforced. Presently, all ports must comply with stringent security measures, but these are going to be enhanced and regulated by the Department of Transport to ensure that all customs rules and regulations are applied that are applicable. They're also having, but we are presently having as part of the outline business case, HMRC engagement calls, and information is available to interested parties should they require. Next slide, please, Joanne. So just some highlights of making use of the powers and the benefits potentially of the Green Freeport. Well, obviously the most important aspect is steering future development. We're currently considering master plan consent areas. This can help provide certainty on where future development might be suitable. There'll be engagement carried out on the master plan consented areas as part of a wider place-based approach that Raymond touched on earlier in his opening remarks. There's an independent governance body that Freeport Company is going to be established to ensure effective delivery of the Freeports. That will have control and operation of the Freeport. Highland Council, the local authority, are the accountable body for all public money to ensure that it is properly and accounted for. Touching just more on the non-domestic rates, Highland Council can retain growth in non-domestic rates in the Green Freeport tax sites for 25 years. This to provide certainty for borrowing and/or to invest in regeneration and infrastructure to support further growth in the region. The local authorities consider how they can use the uplift in non-domestic rates to cover borrowing costs for infrastructure and reinvest in the Green Freeport boundary to regenerate and generate further growth. And our bid, which was lodged, sets out the decision-making process for agreeing how retained rates should be reinvested. That is particularly important for the wider community. I'll now pass on to Ian Taylor for his section. Thank you.
Hi, Ian. I think you're on mute if you would like to take yourself off mute.
Apologies for that. Yes. Good evening, everybody. So I'm just going to give you a few minutes perspective from a developer perspective. So my name's Ian Taylor, Project Director for Thistlewind Partners projects. The two projects being the 1 gigawatt project, approximately 40 kilometres offshore from Kirkwall in the Isles of Orkney, which is in up to around 100 metres of water. So we're looking at a floating foundation project for that particular one. And then the other project we have is also a 1 gigawatt project, about 40 kilometres off the coast of Aberdeen. That's in water depths up to 70 metres. And our current base case foundation for that will be a jacket foundation. We've actually just recently renamed our project. So the one off Orkney is now called Ayr Offshore Wind Farm, and the one off Aberdeen is now called Bowden Offshore Wind Farm, both named after local sort of coastline features. Our project team is based in Edinburgh, building up our team, and you know, we are at this stage in the relatively early stages of development of our projects. So next slide, please. So just to give you a bit more of a flavour where we are with this project, quickly, we started our environmental surveys in March last year, and that is very much what we've been focusing on for the last sort of 12 months or so. We're now going to be starting ground investigation surveys this year, and that will start to inform properly our foundation design. And I think that's important to say, because that is, you know, until we get a better ideas in terms of the types of foundations, particularly for the floating project, it's very difficult to understand and determine exactly what we will be needing from the supply chain at this early stage. But certainly for both projects, and certainly in terms of where the ICF ports are located, they are both in obviously prime locations for potentially providing, you know, marshalling services, fabrication services and assembly services are major components for both projects. We have been engaging with the local supply chain over the last year or so, with events in Aberdeen and in Dundee and up in Kirkwall as well, just to understand what the local supply chain can offer. And I think it's also worth saying that one of our shareholders is DEME Offshore, and they will be providing tier 1 contractor EPCI services to both projects. And of course, DEME is very familiar with the facilities at NIG and Invergordon from the Moray East project, so we're familiar with those 2 projects, and we certainly looking forward to having some more detailed conversations as to how we could use the facilities there, and also provide you with and the port developers with technical information, and as well as sort of market visibility of regarding our plans going forward. And I think the final thing I just wanted to mention as well is that we very much believe in skills development, which is why that Thistlewind Partners has invested £50,000 per year for the next few years with the University of Highlands and Islands to invest in the STEM outreach programme, which will reach out initially into primary school children to basically through training teachers in STEM subjects, and hopefully encourage them to move on to STEM subjects as they go into secondary school and thereafter. Because ultimately what we're looking for is a massive increase in skills development. We probably won't see it during the construction phase, but remember we're talking about a 25-year O&M phase for these projects, and there's going to be a lot of opportunities for local children and graduates and such like to participate in our projects. But thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Ian, and I'm now going to hand over to Joanne Aldy, and Joanne will introduce herself and let you know a little bit more about the powerhouse. Joanne.
Thanks, Raymond. So I'm Joanne, and I'm the Strategy and Business Development Manager for the Port of Cromarty Firth, and I led the Freeport Consortium and through the bidding phase. So I'm going to pick up directly where Ian has left off with the skills piece and talk to you about the powerhouse, which is the Freeport's Skills and Innovation project. We knew that we had to create an awful lot of people with an awful lot of skills, and also we were determined that local people would have those opportunities and be ready for those opportunities should they want to be. So we established the powerhouse quite early on. We've been working on this bid for 3 years now. So the powerhouse has been a part of it probably for at least 2 of those years. And it's there to deliver skills and also research and development. And we aim for that project to become a global centre of excellence in both floating wind and green hydrogen technologies. You've heard a lot about offshore wind today, but there's a lot of green hydrogen projects coming through as well alongside the offshore wind. So hopefully 2 really exciting industries for people to be involved in, and for hopefully our children and grandchildren to be working in long into the future. As Sinclair was saying to you earlier, we have established under our Freeport reinvestment of the national insurance reliefs into a skills and training fund, and that will be run through the powerhouse project once those funds start to flow. It is an independent company. It is run by an independent board. It's a company limited by guarantee, the same as the Freeport, and the Freeport is the sole owner, I suppose, so that we can continue to direct the powerhouse and make sure that it delivers for the region. So it's a project we're all very, very proud of, and we have a fantastic manager called Mina who looks after that project for us. So to talk here, I'm not going to go through the text on the slides line by line. Hopefully you can read that as I'm speaking, but I wanted to kind of leave you with the next steps, and then I've just got one more slide left. I'm sure you're pleased to know, so please start preparing your questions. I think what happens with these big announcements is the announcement's made and then everybody says, OK, so it must be open tomorrow then. And of course, it doesn't quite happen that way. So we wanted to be able to share with you what we have to do next before we can become operational. So there were 4 elements to the next phase. The first one was that we had to have our governance approved by both governments. So UK government and Scottish government both are overseeing this initiative together, and we had to demonstrate to them that we had sufficient and effective governance protocols and processes in place to properly manage any public money, and also to deliver on the ambitions that we put into the bid. So we had to do that before any of the capacity building funding that Steve mentioned was released. And I'm pleased to say that the first tranche of that funding has now been agreed, and we have successfully passed that part of the test, which is great. So what we're moving on to now is delivery of the outline business case, and that's a 12 to 16 week process whereby we have to add to the information that we put into the bid, bring it up to date. We have a full 5-case business case that we have to deliver. So there's a lot of information in there, including additional socioeconomic impact assessments, decarbonisation plans, economic cases, financial cases, and that all has to be delivered before we can become operational, and it must be approved by government. So there's another few month process at least before that will be approved. At the same time, we have to bring our tax sites into legislation. So we have to agree the boundaries with the government, and the government then have to lay down laws to bring those tax sites into being. And we have to do the same or similar operation with our customs site authorisations. We have to have at least one of those ready before we can become operational and before that outline business case can be approved. So we're expecting, and the governments are expecting, that process to take about 12 months. And only when that happens and we become operational do the tax reliefs and the customs benefits start to become available to the businesses. After that, we have to do a full business case, so it's even more information on all of those same areas, and it's the full business case approval that then releases the up to £25 million of seed funding that is available to be spent in that outer boundary. So if you remember the maps that Steve showed right at the beginning, we've given the government 2 options of areas, and we're hoping that they go for the bigger land area, but we are still negotiating that with the governments at the moment. But hopefully that means then that those the seed capital and that the non-domestic rates that will be retained can be spent within that outer boundary. There are strict rules on how that 25 million initial seed capital can be spent. We have had a few people ask us if we can fund their projects or fund their charities. Sadly, we're not at that point. That money has to be spent in opening the tax sites up to generate the jobs and the investment that Sinclair was talking you through. So my final slide is about what we're going to try and do, what we have been doing to keep communities and other stakeholders informed as to what is happening with the Freeport. As you might have gathered, it's a little bit of a monster. It's quite complicated. There's a lot of different elements to it. So we appreciate that just a single webinar probably isn't good enough for you to fully understand what it means and what it means for your community, for your business. So we do plan to keep running a series of these events, and the webinar was just the quickest way to get information out to you after the award, but we do intend to do face-to-face events, and we're planning a roadshow for the future, and as we learn more we will be able to share more with you about the next steps in the process and the timelines and things like that. We are working obviously very closely with Highland Council. They've been partners in the consortium from the first days, and they have been absolutely fantastic and very, very supportive of the consortium. They are working on a number of place-based approaches, and these are really great opportunities for communities to feed into these work streams and to really make meaning of what Inverness Cromarty Firth Green Freeport means for those communities. So the Black Isle plan is already underway, and the Easter Ross and the Inverness strategies are due to begin late April, I believe. We're also trying to align obviously with the climate action towns in Invergordon and Alness that were awarded, I think, last year, if I remember correctly. And as one of the previous speakers was talking about, Highland Council are applying for this master plan consent area to try and smooth out some of the planning requirements and help us get through that process. Not skipping anything we need to do, please don't think we're trying to cut any corners, but where we can smooth and make things a little bit quicker and a little bit more efficient, we're very keen to do that. There'll be lots of businesses hopefully applying for planning at the same time to try and make the best use of these benefits that are coming through Freeport. So we want to try and smooth that and make sure that that goes through as quickly as possible, because then that is what generates the jobs and the growth. And I'm delighted to say personally that we are recruiting a managing director as well, who will take over from my role and will run the Freeport company going forward. And we will be recruiting further staff at later stages. But at this stage, we're on 3 jobs. I think we have appointed a powerhouse manager who's been in post for a couple of years. We have an independent chair for the Freeport company, who will also be an employee fairly shortly, and then we'll have a managing director. So we are already practicing what we preach, I suppose, in creating jobs. So I hope that's given you a really solid overview of what Freeport's all about and what has to happen next. And we're very much looking forward to your questions, and I will pass back to Raymond, who's going to take you through the next part.
Thanks very much to Joanne. Thanks very much to all the speakers there who introduced those slides. We have what we want to do is make sure that there's plenty of time for your questions. So I'm not going to hold the procedures up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reintroduce you to Scott Dalgarno. He's one of the key officers at Council who has been supporting this the Council's involvement with this project since its inception. And Scott is going to administrate the question and answer session. I noticed that we have a number of questions in there, so if we can ask the folks who are going to be given the hospital pass, let's call it, from Scott, if they can be brief, and we can manage to keep as many questions going as possible up to the end of the chat. We will be finishing at 7 o'clock on the dot. So Scott, I'll hand over to yourself, and thanks very much for taking the question and answer session for us.
Thank you, Raymond, and thank you to all of you who've posed really useful questions, and also those of you who've actually used the thumbs up feature. It's a useful thing for us to be able to tell where there's a demand from you all for different issues to be exposed this evening. If I could start in chronological order for the questions that were posed. Victor was the first in with a question to the panel about the population, the likely impact on population and the potential for people moving into the area. And I'm conscious that the panel might want to say something about the importance of the existing population and the benefits for those, as well as any potential for people moving into the area. I wonder, although you have just finished, whether, Joanne, you might wish to start on that one?
I'm perhaps the logical person to start, because I'm the obvious non-Scot who did move into the area. But let me perhaps reassure local people that everything we did and everything the consortium did, and this was an incredible group of people that came together to try and win this for the region. Everybody wanted to reverse depopulation and see local children have the choice whether they wanted to move away for work and for university, or to have a choice to actually stay here and have incredible jobs and careers on their doorstep. And that really is what drove us. We want to move away. I think the ports historically in this region, particularly ours and Nig, have relied on a mobile workforce for a lot of the big projects, because the projects come and go. So you may have a big project for a couple of years, but then the project goes and the workforce is no longer required. We hope with what's coming through ScotWind and the hydrogen projects and through Freeport that we can shift that model to a more sustainable year-round job model. So local people can benefit, local children can stay in the area, but also hopefully we do attract some of that workforce in, but that they come in with their families, they settle here, they spend their wages here, and that is where you get the levelling up. And this initiative was a levelling up initiative by the government. This is about creating that level playing field with other, perhaps, you know, the Central Belt in Scotland, to use that as an example. So hopefully that gives you some reassurance, but we are expecting some population growth, and we have been working with some of the infrastructure bodies to look at what does that mean in terms of housing and roads and things like that, for example.
Thank you, Joanne. And for the rest of the panel members, feel free to chip in with any supplementary questions, answers that you may wish to throw in, and likewise to those on attending the session. If you have any supplementaries on any points that haven't quite been covered, feel free to add those into the chat, to the Q&A field, please. The next question is from Councillor Angela McLean, who asks about an issue that's central to the bid that was submitted for the Inverness and Cromarty Firth Green Freeport, which is about how it supports the national transition to net zero. But the question that's been asked in that context is about pay levels relative to the oil and gas industry. And I wonder if that's something that Steve and Ian, you may wish to come in on.
Yeah, I can pick that one off, Scott. So there's a baseline commitment, obviously, within the Freeport for the living wage. But of course, when you look at the type of inward investment we're looking to attract, it's high-tech manufacturing, very automated, very state-of-the-art factories, good, clean jobs suited to men and ladies, so very gender neutral, because they're basically around renewables, also jobs with purpose, which is the message we're seeing coming from the schools. And of course, because of the technical nature of a lot of the jobs, whether they be essentially blue collar or white collar jobs, the majority of those will be above the base living wage. And in that respect, in terms of the technical competences that people need to take on those jobs, they won't be that dissimilar to oil and gas. In fact, some of them will be a transfer of skills, particularly from oil and gas. And if we think that oil and gas has led the world from the likes of Scotland and the UK in floating oil production technology, many of those skills are directly transferable into the floating offshore wind scenario. So we'll see a lot of new jobs, we'll see a lot of new factories with high degrees of automation, high skills required, and a large transfer of commensurate skills coming across from oil and gas. So there'll be good, well-paid job opportunities coming from that. Ian, as a developer that's going to be driving a lot of that, do you want to add anything to that? You'll have to come off mute, I think.
Support what you were saying there, Steve. I think just to add to that, obviously, in contrast probably to oil and gas, is that there's a lot more focus on serial production of, for instance, jackets and other components. So for each one of our projects, we'll be needing between 50 and 60 foundations, whereas with oil and gas, it tends to be sort of more one-off but large contracts. And I think that will provide that sort of continuity for the workforce in Scotland.
Thank you to you both. If I may jump ahead to a related question that's come in, not in the order of appearance, but I will come back to the others for anyone that's worried. There is a related question that's been posed by an Ella, who, as it happens, is a current MSc student for sustainable energy at the UHI. So hopefully one of our future workforce here. She'd like to know about the different types of opportunities that are likely to be available. Is it about entry-level jobs, postgraduate jobs, and what kind of indication can we give on that? I wonder if that's something that Sinclair and Joanne, you might want to comment on.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Yes, I think just picking up on the points made earlier by both Steve and Ian, jobs will be right across the board. I think we're not just looking for entry-level jobs or graduates or postgraduates. I think the whole range, the whole spectrum will be there. And that's where, again, where the powerhouse will come into play as well, by offering training opportunities to fit that gap. And I think that's very important, and it is a recognisable, important plank of the strategy we've got. So I definitely foresee that a whole range of skills will be required, not just postgraduates or graduates, but a whole range. And where we need to plug the gap for the Indigenous people here, then the powerhouse will offer that ideal opportunity to train and profile the people for the vacancies. Joanne, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Just to say that I agree. Yeah, I mean, all of these offshore wind projects, the hydrogen projects, the supply chain that will support them, they all need the engineers and the technical staff, but they also need finance people, they need HR people, they need IT people. There's a whole host of skills that will be required. So there are opportunities for everybody if they want them and if they're interested.
Could I just add also that it's not just during construction operation, it's also in project development. There is a significant skill shortage in project development skills like marine scientists, marine biologists, all of these important expertise that are needed to actually get these projects to planning consent and beyond. So yeah, let's not forget those sort of skills as well.
And the plumbers.
And the plumbers.
Thanks, panel. I'm conscious that the questions are now rolling in thick and fast at an increasing rate, so we'll rattle through them as quick as possible. If I could try and group issues together as much as possible, I'll take a quick response to one of the questions that's been posed about community benefit. And it's just, and that was from Helen Barton, and it's just to state that folks you might want to be aware of something called a new national planning framework from Scottish Government. There's a new set of national policies that planning applications will be tested against, and that requires us to look carefully at community benefit as part of any development activity that is taking place. So it's something that's being looked at very carefully, particularly for the Green Freeport project, when there is an aim to deliver some significant ongoing benefits for communities above and beyond the immediate impacts that we see for the businesses and the communities in the shorter term. So it is something that is absolutely being looked at as part of this, and I invite the panel to say anything else about that should they wish to add anything to that. But a related question, if I may, if I can pose to you, Steve, is about another kind of operational issue about amenity implications of some of the operations that might come from this, and how those issues might be handled. And I'm conscious that there is, of course, the place plan activities that are underway, but how might we kind of give some assurance on some of those implications of the existing operations?
Yeah, I think in terms of the operations that we're doing, of course, as we take major projects or major developments, and we're seeing quite a growing interest in inward investees in the area, we're making sure that we're consulting with the communities early doors just on what the impacts of those are. We've already started that process. One of the potential factory developments had community engagement sessions in Cromarty yesterday, and there's one ongoing as we speak in Nig this afternoon and evening doing the same thing, and that will feed initial concerns and thoughts very much into the early stages of planning. And you mentioned National Planning Framework 4, much more demanding requirements now there and improving biodiversity, even decarbonisation plans for future greening, if you like, of even the new developments that's coming in. So I think one of the benefits is that old-fashioned heavy industry, it was noisy, etc., whereas the factories of tomorrow, very much quieter, higher tech, and not really the same impact. And to Ian's point as well, a lot of the boom and bust that we saw in the oil and gas industry gets taken away. So what we're seeing is kind of very modern factories, very clean, much quieter, much more use of automated equipment. It talks to the white collar skills and the opportunities for graduates to program and maintain and operate that equipment. And of course, as we're doing tonight, which is just really the start of consultation for every one of these individual projects that we come to take on board, there's going to be lots of consultation and feedback taken into consideration from the communities, and their voices will be heard.
Thank you, Steve. And on another issue about some of the implications that people are thinking about from all of this, an issue of housing has come up from a couple of people across the questions that have rolled in, and I wonder if Joanne, you might want to say something about the issues around accommodation and the workforce or the future, and how they might be supported.
Yeah, housing comes up quite a lot. We're in a better space than perhaps some of the other Freeport bidders in that we do have land available. There's obviously a huge development at Tornagrain and on that side of Inverness, but there are 3 sites already earmarked for planning on the north of the Cromarty Firth as well. They haven't been developed due to a lack of demand at this point, but they are in the Cromarty Firth local development plan. So we're relatively comfortable that we have got space to grow, and we don't have to grow tomorrow. This is a long-term plan. We hope this is going to generate long-term prospects and long-term benefits. So we have got time to prepare and make sure that we're ready, and we're trying to do that as best we can.
Yeah, and if I may, I'll pick up the related issue, take one myself, the question of infrastructure, and folk are asking about rail services and infrastructure, and it would just be to say to you all that we as a council are obviously thinking through those implications alongside all the other partners that are on the call today and involved in the consortium, and thinking really carefully about what might be needed to support the operation of the Green Freeport, but of course communities that form part of that, and part of the future workforce, and part of the future people looking to gain skills and employment in these areas in the future. So we're thinking very carefully about those implications, and that will form part of those public engagements that are proposed as part of those place plans, as well as learning more through the community briefings that are proposed. If I could turn to another operational issue, Sinclair, would you be able to cover a question that's been posed by Andy Thurgood about the security checks versus the existing customs arrangements? Do you want to say a little bit about that?
You're on mute, Sinclair.
Yeah, if you can take yourself off mute, Sinclair.
No, I'm off. Sorry. Yes, sorry. So as a port, we currently operate under stringent security measures. In terms of both goods coming in and goods exporting, and we've got our own customs clearance procedures we've got to go through, and we operate through what's termed a approved economic operator status, C status. But for the Green Freeport, that's got to be upped to AEOS status, which puts more onus on the port to ensure that the goods that are transiting through the port and leaving the port meet the stringent requirements. And we've got to liaise with HMRC over that. There are strict boundaries. It's not, they're all fenced in, so it's not a site which is open to the public. Whereas if you come down to the port here in Inverness, I'm sure you go to Cromarty as well and to Neg, you can't get in, because there's fencing around it, and we've got really to police very carefully. And that was one of the concerns, or not one of the concerns, but one of the things that we have to demonstrate in our bid is what measures we're going to put in place to ensure that there is transparency in relation to customs. There's not customs people trying to circumvent customs and tax regulation. Very much, it's very onerous.
Thank you, Sinclair. And on a related question, I'll try and pick up as many as possible in the time available. But Joanne, there's a question that's been posed by Councillor Lindsay Johnson about the impact on cruise ships and how that might be managed alongside any intensification of activities here. Would you like to take that one?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that question. So the cruise ships come in on a totally separate key at the moment to the key that we use. So the key you can see behind me is the one we typically use for renewables. They need a very large land area to move these very large components around. So we don't foresee any impact on the cruise industry. But I think it's worth saying everybody thinks the cruise industry is really sexy, but the cruise industry is seasonal. So our cruise industry starts next week and runs through to October, and it's phenomenal and it's brilliant through the summer. It creates its own challenges, but actually the port and the local region could not survive on cruise alone. We need year-round jobs and year-round activity, and that is what the energy industry has historically given us and will give us into the future. So cruise is a very important industry for our port, please don't get me wrong, but it's not the most important industry. The energy industry is the most important industry for us.
Thank you. That's great. And turning to another issue, we've Bethany from the Climate Action, I think it's the Highland Climate Action Group, I think she represents, was asking about how different people might input to the process, the ongoing process. I've already mentioned the place plans, but there's a certain eagerness there for different people to be involved and for climate groups locally to be inputting to that. I guess we can all reassure that you know, there's many different ways in which we're trying to get people involved in that, and also note that some are talking about, you know, some communities being in a better and a more being better equipped to make their views known. And I guess I would just want to reassure that as part of that place planning activity, we will be looking to reach out to those who maybe don't want to necessarily turn up at events. So we're happy to hear from those here tonight about how you wish to, what the best methods are for reaching out to you to hear different views from all the corners of our communities. Turning to there's a a question that's been posed about the scale of, well, the question is about the amount of infrastructure that's been that's waiting in the wings, but I wonder if the panel might want to comment on the nature and scale of investment this is likely to instigate and the timescales for that. I don't know, Steve, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I can kick that one off and then hand over to Joanne and to Ian and Sinclair. But yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of interest. We've seen a lot of interest in the renewable and hydrogen sector for a few years now, but the business case for these wasn't as attractive as it is with the benefits of the Green Freeport. So many business cases started and fell away as they failed to get the financial approval decisions from their respective shareholders or investors. Now we're seeing a lot of those projects coming back on the table, and the earliest of those is one of the factories we've got, which is in public consultation today. And that's the one for a high voltage cable manufacturing plant, which would be the only one of its kind to that specification in the UK. That's significantly important for national energy security because we're one of only 2 G7 countries that don't have that type of facility within our own territory. And there's a few projects like that with regard to manufacture of products for offshore wind and floating wind, and a few factories that will come, which in aggregate, I think we alone are involved in some, which would probably aggregate to well over about 1,500 jobs. And that's a start, because as each comes in, it creates this cluster effect of related businesses coming alongside or smaller businesses coming in to support, and creates lots of startup opportunities for local entrepreneurs as well, and graduates to look at what they can do. So we're seeing the things starting now. I would suspect that by the time we get into early summer, the first full planning applications for those developments will have been submitted to the council for review and action. Joanne, I know you're tracking a lot of those as well and seeing the same thing. Do you want to comment a bit further?
Yeah, sure. I think it's important to just give a little bit of context to this. So the Highlands is uniquely placed to benefit from this huge amount of offshore wind that is going to be built off the shores of our country, and as a consequence of that, we have an ability to play a significant role in Scotland reaching net zero. So that we've got a really important part to play, and the Freeport has really put the Highlands on the map. But in order to build that out, you can't just build it out at any port. These offshore turbines are very large, they're getting larger. And if I move slightly, you can see one of the floating turbines behind me. This is a 2 megawatt unit, and this is just a demonstrator, and we're currently quoting on 20 megawatt units. So these things are quite large. You can't just put them at any port. So the reality is we need to expand our facilities within our region. And if we don't, we are really the only place in Scotland that can do this at this scale and deliver what the industry needs and deliver the government's requirements on net zero and also on local content. If we don't do that here, it will realistically go abroad, and the associated jobs will go abroad. So those of you that have been involved with the ports engagement activities will know we're looking at a potentially 150 million to 200 million pounds expansion of our facilities, which could double the size of the facilities that we have. And that's the kind of land space that we need to have available to be able to accommodate these industries and ensure that those jobs land here rather than go abroad. And we believe it's in everybody's interest to make that happen. But of course, through the consultation on these kind of expansions, we will hear from the communities and be able to sense check whether the communities agree with that you also want to see it here.
John, if I may, I think the point you just made picks up on a couple of the other questions that have been posed about fears that this might just be all about jobs being prioritised over the environment, or in spite of any impact on the environment. And I would just like to point out that from the council's point of view, the very reason why we and other key agencies public agencies have been involved from day one is to start that process of highlighting how we manage those issues very carefully. And the Green Freeport, as Joanne has highlighted, can help us manage the environmental issues, make the most of our environmental assets that are unique to Highland, but actually embrace and improve upon those, and not least in line with those new national policies that say we have to. So it's about a balancing act between all those different things, and giving new jobs, but also making really good use, looking really after our environment very, very well indeed. And the onus is on all of us, including the council and the public agencies, to look after that. But I wonder if the panel might want to talk about the respective sectors' input to that, in terms of achieving that balance between managing the environment and embracing it, and looking after it in delivering all of this. Can
I just jump back in? So I feel really passionately about this question in particular. We have to expand the facilities, and that will have an impact on the environment. We can't dodge that. That's just a fact of life. But everything we are doing on ScotWind is about delivering net zero for our country. So the bigger picture is that this is a very positive environmental story, and it comes with lots of clean jobs, lots of exciting careers. And above and beyond that, Scotland is leading the way at the moment in floating wind and green hydrogen technologies. And if we can maintain that position, then people who develop the skills and businesses that develop the expertise in those sectors can then take that around the world, and they can help decarbonise other countries as they also set out on that journey. There is an incredible role for us to play to be at the centre of decarbonisation globally. And I don't think that should be underestimated. This could not be a greener story. You know, we have an incredible role to play, and we have a central role to play in this region, and it's up to us to grasp it if we want it. But that is how other people view us looking in. We're at the centre of the universe as far as offshore wind and green hydrogen is concerned in the UK, and it's up to us how much of that pie and how many of those opportunities we want to grab.
Okay, thank you everyone, and thank you for all the questions posed. Just to reassure that we will pick up any others that we haven't been able to answer tonight, but thank you very much everyone. I hope you've feel better informed from it. Raymond, over to you.
Thanks very much. Yes, just to reiterate the point that Scott made there, but first of all, can I thank everybody on the panel tonight. An hour is a short period, but as Joanne has said, this is not the be-all and end-all of having discussions with the community. And for those of you who have questions in the list there, and some of them have still to be answered, and some of them about concerns, you know, which we've answered some of those questions here tonight, but still some of them outstanding, but also about the opportunities, about infrastructure, about how we're going to see the expansion opportunities. But as Joanne said, this is not the switching on of a tap and all of a sudden floods of money, floods of jobs, floods of requirement for infrastructure are going to be required within the next short-term period of weeks and months. This has all been part of a plan in terms of the submission of the bid, and we all have the ability to be able to work at realising the most from this opportunity that has that's come into the Highlands. So thanks to the panel, thanks to everybody for attending, thanks for your questions, and also thanks for the engagement. Joanne, any last points in terms of communication going forward, website, etc.?
I think we've just been asked to post the opportunity Inverness. Well, it's now the Inverness and Cromarty Firth Green Freeport site. So if you go to greenfreeport.scot, you will find Inverness and Cromarty Firth Green Freeport. So we will put the video up on the website, and we will answer any other Q&As that were outstanding. We won't be able to do it tomorrow, I apologise, but we will do that over the coming days. So do keep an eye on the website. We're also on social media, and we do put lots of updates on social media. So do please follow us and give us your feedback, share comments and things like that. We are very keen to hear from communities and make sure that you're part of this story and part of this journey. Thanks very much for that, Joanne. Maybe if we could ensure that
that link is made available to everybody who's been in attendance tonight. I know that there was a lot of invitations went out. That's us at 7 o'clock, everybody. And once again, thanks for your attendance. Thanks to all the panel members. We look forward to the next engagement session, Joanne, and I'm sure that that won't be too far in the future. So with that, I bid you good night. Have a very restful and safe evening. Good night, everybody.